Hello and welcome to Channel's Book Club. My name is Olakunle Kasumu and it's great to be on this show today. As always, a show where we discuss all things books. Finally, I can offer my verdict on Culprits by Dele Ogun. Simply put, superb book. I totally loved it. I had many eye-popping and eureka moments while reading this 350-page thrilling history book. Of course, the author, Dele Ogun, a lawyer and historian, often criticized by some for leaning too much on the Brits caused our problems explanation of the Nigerian mess, did not waver on his theory. He has pretty much been consistent with it. But any open-minded reader will likely sense that Culprits is a compelling and interesting book. In it, you will meet the imperialists who shaped Nigeria fundamentally. Joseph Chamberlain, Lord Salisbury, Robert Cecil, Goldie Taubman, Frederick Lugard, Flora Shaw, Leopold Ameri, Lewis Vernon Harcourt, Winston Churchill, and so on. The stories and anecdotes in Culprits are intriguing, and each can stand alone as a storyline for a hit docuseries or movie about the Nigerian story. For example, how Goldie Taubman formed the Royal Niger Company, which went on to own the territory that would later be named Nigeria by getting ethnic rulers to sign 400 handover treaties. How the British government paid £865,000 as part payment for the treaties and offered 50% royalties on all minerals gotten from the Niger area for the next 100 years, which ended in 1999, as balance payment. How Frederick Lugard was recruited to secure Goldie's treaties, bring the north of Nigeria under British rule, and amalgamate the northern and southern protectorates. How Flora Louise Shaw, the woman who wrote for the Times to promote the British Empire's expansion, was once Goldie Taubman's girl and then later became Frederick Lugard's girl. How the radical liberal Joseph Chamberlain became the greatest imperialist of the British Empire, and how his insistence on capturing the Sokoto Caliphate became a crucial decider in the Nigerian formation story. How the Southern Nigeria Protectorate was de-amalgamated by Bernard Henry Bourdillon to keep Southern Nigeria divided. How Lugard used the indirect rule system to devastating effect in northern Nigeria. How the Biafra War was in some ways a proxy war, etc. There are many more sub-stories and subplots in Culprits.
Welcome to this special edition of Have Your Say 247. My name is Rudolf Okonkwo, and we have a special guest today on our show. Now, we are going to talk to our guest for about 1 hour. Then we invite you to join us in this important conversation. Let me play you a profile of our guest.
Publisher and public speaker, Dele Ogun has excelled in multiple careers, significantly contributing to the legal and writing fields. In November 1969, 7-year-old Dele embarked on a nearly 7-hour journey aboard the BOAC from Lagos to London. Little did he know the challenges he would face in a new land where speaking his beloved Yoruba would set him apart. Raised in the village of Ayede in Ekiti State by his grandparents, Dele quickly adapted by winning over local boys with his football skills. After earning his LLB from London Metropolitan University in 1984 and completing his call to the English bar at the Inns of Court School of Law in 1985, he obtained an LLM in Company and Commercial Law from the London School of Economics in 1987. Dele founded Akin Palmer LLP, a London-based law firm specializing in commercial litigation and international arbitration disputes. With over 21 years of experience, he also maintains a practice in Lagos, Nigeria. In 2009, he published his first book, The Law, the Lawyers, and the Lawless, an autobiographical reflection of his journey from Nigeria to becoming a successful lawyer. His subsequent work, Ostrich Nation, Golden Jubilee, critiques Nigeria's socio-political landscape through the metaphor of an ostrich, highlighting issues such as corruption and leadership failures. In A Fatherless People, the secret story of how the Nigerians missed the road to the promised land, Dele explores Nigeria's historical evolution from British colonialism to contemporary challenges, examining how colonial powers manipulated ethnic divisions that hindered national unity. His other works include Oyinbo Came to Africa, Identify and Development, A Slave Ship Called Jesus, and the upcoming 50 Years of Britain. True to his bold mandate of saving Nigerians from Nigeria, as seen on his X page, Dele advocates for accountability and proactive governance. As a student in London, Dele Ogun worked as a security guard. Today, he is passionate about the plight of Nigeria and Nigerians and has written half a dozen books to educate Nigerians on the malaise afflicting the country.
All right. Please join me. Let's welcome to the show Dele Ogun. Dele, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rudolf. Good afternoon, London time.
Right. Thank you. And we appreciate you coming back. You have a new book that is out that is making waves. So we will get to that. But first, let's start with the conversation going on today. This is Saturday, February 15th, as we speak. African leaders are gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where they are meeting to talk about issues of interest to Africans. This has been going on for more than 60 years. Is AU relevant today to Africans?
Yeah, thank you for that question. February 2025. It was actually February 1885 that the Berlin Conference concluded. It was 26th of February 1885. The Europeans had sat in conference over a map of Africa, which they treated almost as a blank sheet. They had sat for 4 months deciding how our continent was to be reconfigured in accordance or to satisfy their own power interests. And we're now at the 140th anniversary of those deliberations, out of which was born the countries that we now know as Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya. The identities that we had, Yoruba, Igbo, Ijaw, etc., were cancelled at that conference. And we were given these new identities to run with. And come 1963-64, the then managers of these new entities fabricated by Europe were asked to ratify what the Europeans had done, i.e. keep those borders, keep those new vessels, keep those new identities, and run forward with it. And a decision was made that we should stay within the European manufactured entities and identities. And since then, the AU, which was the Organization for Africa Unity, created, I say, by those European powers. And when the Europeans changed their identity from the European Union or European Community, whatever they called themselves originally, to EU, guess what? Our own, I call them plantation overseers, followed like the sheep that they were and switched over to AU. So EU, they switched to EU, We switched from OAU to AU. This is the reality, that the courage for fresh thinking has been sorely absent. And this is why the AU, or whatever they call themselves, have been an irrelevance to the aspirations of Africans. Yes, they're relevant to the condition because they, in my own assessment, are responsible as overseers of the plantations that the Europeans left behind. So they have responsibility, and they've played their role as they were expected to. Managers simply manage a situation. Leaders are different. Leaders are moving people from a position to another, more advanced position. Managers simply contain the situation. They manage it, they keep it stable and steady. So that's why there they are deliberating in Addis now. What has changed? What has changed? The courage to think differently is what has been sorely absent. Look at what's happening on the wider political stage now. It's the winners that are coming out with a bold new thinking. And what do I mean by that? Like him or hate him, Donald Trump has come in and has changed the narrative. Look at all that we're hearing now about US aid or USAID, whatever they call themselves. The Americans were sitting on top of the world anyway. Who needs to change the game? But the courage for fresh thinking, to say, there's something wrong here. If the roles were reversed, our leaders are called the managers of the AU. They'll simply be ticking the same boxes. They'll simply be dancing the same tune. But here's the leader of the pack, top of the table, first in the class, having the courage to look at the way they're doing things and saying something is wrong here. And they come out pulling the plug on the modus operandi that had brought them that success. So this year, as I said, it's the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference. It is time for new thinking from we Africans. And as part of that, we, Fatherland Group, in association with the Africa Centre in London and in association with the University of Lagos, are organizing a week-long conference in November this year, first week of November, starting November the 3rd, at which we will be revisiting the Berlin Conference from our perspective, with a view to changing the narrative. Fresh thinking is required.
Let me ask you a little bit about this African Union. You know, from the very beginning of the coming together of African leaders, they had different groups. There was what they call the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group, who have different ideas about the direction Africa should go from the very beginning. Do you think that the conversation is still going on, maybe in an informal way, in terms of how Africa has basically been static despite the years? And what direction do you think you want the continent to go? Do you think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation for the intelligent people, for aspirational people, the conversation about which way to go must never stop. It can never stop. And so the Monrovia group and the Casablanca group, they had their dialogue and their debate at the time. But we've tended to think that the decision made then to keep those borders, because that was a core part of that conversation, decision made then in 1964 binds us forever. That is perpetual. That cannot be. You've got to, human beings, intelligent societies must always be rethinking, in the light of altered circumstances, the correct way forward. And this is a core part of what we in the Fatherland Group have been doing, which is thinking the way forward, not even just for Nigeria and Nigerians, but also for the continent of Africa. And we say the choice is this. We either continue as we are, as many of our people think, oh, just keep pushing, let's just keep going forward. Let's just keep going as we are, as the European power brokers configured us, and we will get there. But you've just got to have the courage to audit the journey so far. That how long have you been traveling this direction? And what is your audit your performance critically? And have an honest assessment as to how far you're traveling. Look to your comparators and your competitors. Look to the story of Southeast Asia. Look to the story of Singapore and Malaysia, who were similarly bound up in federation. Look at the story of China over the last 100 years. Look at the story of Eastern Europe, the emergence of new countries, like my favorite one, Lithuania, a tiny country of 2.8 million people, who for 110 years were similarly taken off the map. 1795 up until 1915. You looked at the map during that period, there was no place called Lithuania. They had been carved up between Prussia and Russia. They weren't there. At times they were speaking the Polish language, at times they were speaking the Russian language. But look them up now, and they are back. That is the product of the courage of fresh thinking and also courageous thinking. You see, our confidence as a people has been damaged. And confidence is like a spine. You know, as confidence is for the individual, or the spine is for the individual, so confidence is for the nation. If your spine is broken, you can't walk and you can't run. If your confidence as a people is broken, you can't walk and you can't run. It's all about restoring that confidence. That's what the nations of Eastern Europe have done. Whether you're talking about the Czech Republic, Slovakia, where did these countries come from? Africans have to have that conversation to say, what is the way forward? Is it Pan-Africanism that we've been paying lip service to over these years? As long as I've been alive, I've been hearing Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanism. Where has it got us? How realistic is it in the light of Nigeria's experience? If you want to create the United States of Africa with the thousands of nations and languages that will form that entity, and you're looking for a Superman that will run that place, common sense says you've got to look at the nearest comparator. And what's the nearest comparator to the United States of Africa that Pan-Africanists dream of? It is Nigeria, with its 371 ethnic groups that were lumped together for looking for a superpower, a Superman. What is our record? This is how intelligent beings have to behave. So we say, forget that. We've tried that. Nigeria is your working model. You got to think something different. And that's where we say the way forward is actually the way back. It is the Orange Union. In the same way, Lithuania, that was buried, a nation that was buried alive, our nations, which were buried alive, have to be revived. But we do want union. I mean, that's what the debate is about. We want union. It's good neighborliness. We're not loners. We're social peoples. Yes, so we love the positives that we all bring, but we can't afford an arrangement whereby those positives are stifled and neutralized and cancelled by a scramble like crabs, everybody for the one seat. So we say Orange Union is the way. Orange Union, just like that orange, all the segments are supportive, but distinctive. and together they make the whole, and the skin wraps them. Beautiful and unified. It really is simple. And it's so simple because that is what they are using. That is what they're doing in Europe. They're not looking for a German to run Britain and say he's what's the language that we like to use? Detribalize. A detribalized German will be the president of Europe, and he will get the first 11 together. I say nonsense. Fatherland says nonsense. Let's stop trying to outdo everybody else. Look across the world. Look how they organize their affairs. Little Vietnam. Who runs Vietnam? A Vietnamese. Look at Cambodia. It's the same. Why are you trying to be cleverer than the rest? Why? We need humility. That's what Fatherland says.
We'll get into details of that idea, but let me get your take on what's going on today in Sudan and also in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is a war going on in Congo and in Sudan, and people who looked at this connected it to what happened at the Berlin conference, the way these countries are structured. And people have been dying in Congo, dying in Sudan, and African leaders today are meeting in Addis Ababa without the power to change anything. Really, they are not able to influence what's happening in their own neighborhood or change it. So what does that say about any idea that we want to put out when a crisis that requires African leaders to come together and take action, they've not been able to do that?
Yes, you see, Sudan, whether you talk about Sudan, whether you talk about Congo, whether you talk about Rwanda, these are all part of the Berlin legacy. You see, the narrative that they sold us and peddled to our grandfathers and fathers was that they were bringing civilization. These European, when they were constructing these artificial entities, Sudan, artificial, Congo, artificial, Rwanda, artificial, all of them artificial. And the dividends has been blood and tears and death. You look across the continent, there's one crisis or another going on. And this is all the fallout of the Berlin Conference, of these artificial entities. Sudan, the worst aspect of Sudan was that the North and South Sudan, yes, one largely Islamic and one predominantly Christian, were amalgamated in the late 50s, just before their so-called independence. They plugged opposites. They plugged virtual incompatibles, even after the experience that they had from Nigeria of plugging a predominantly Islamic group with a predominantly Christian group, to show you the wickedness of those who I call the colonial Confucianists. Despite their own experience of crisis between Protestants and Catholics in Britain. So anybody who suggests that this is a black thing and black people just can't govern themselves, let them look at the history of conflicts between Protestants and Catholics, not even just in Ireland, in England itself, within the British royal family, to the point until recently, they actually had, in fact, I don't even know if they've changed it, that a Catholic cannot be prime minister in England. That is why Tony Blair did not confess his Catholicism until after he had finished his term. And it was the day after he finished his service as prime minister that suddenly he said he declared himself to be a Catholic. These are realities of human existence, not peculiar to the black race, but those who created these vessels of conflict, because that's what they were. You know, when they were stitching up the borders of these places, when they were amalgamating peoples, and even when they were dividing them, it was conscious. And as culprits shows, these were what they called deliberate acts of statesmanship. Conscious, in fact, that's the language they use, conscious acts of statesmanship. The agenda was, how do we control these places? And the best way to control a target is, if you're not indigenous to that place, is to embed crisis and conflict within it. Because then you always find someone who, left to themselves, would not be powerful enough to run that place. But with the external support, they now become your agent on the ground. It's like business. I come from a background of corporate law, international corporate deals. And when the big corporation, the multinational, wants to get into a new territory, what do they look for? They look for somebody who knows the territory and who wants to partner with them. That individual has his or her own aspirations, and we, the multinational, have our own agenda. And if they rhyme, we then provide the resources to that person on the ground to enable them to extract the stuff that we need. As it is for corporations and multinational operations, so it is for geopolitics. You look for the partners on the ground who will ally with you, where there's common interest. And that's how the game is played. So all these crisis points that run, all the bleeding that takes place every day across the continent of Africa, it goes back to the Berlin Conference. This is why we've got to revisit their deliberations, out of which all these life-consuming countries emerged.
Now, during the era of colonization, they described Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, as the dark continent. Do you think it's accurate?
You see, one of the beauty of history is that one comes to understand the world as it really is. And be careful about those who teach you history. History is best learnt. Yes, is best learnt. You do the reading yourself. Don't trust ChatGPT or even what do they call it? DeepSeek. Don't trust any of those. You're the one that has to do the deep dive, because what you then see, as I saw in the course, because I was a curious person, that was a question that was bugging me. I was hearing these narratives about the dark continent. I was hearing the narratives as a young boy growing up in the West about Africans always killing themselves and selling themselves into slavery. And I was uncomfortable with this narrative. You see, some of our people are comfortable with that narrative, especially amongst the intellectuals. They absolutely love it. They're busy recycling it and promoting it. I was uncomfortable, maybe because as a young person, I was always seeking understanding. And if you told me a story, even if it's in the Bible, I'm asking myself, how can that be true? Yeah? That doesn't seem to make sense. And I will explore and dig. And what I found when I started doing the research into European history, guess who was killing themselves all the time? It was them. They were the ones killing themselves all the time. This is where their 30 years war came from, 1618 to 1648, 30 years. And that it wasn't between sort of just France against Prussia. Prussia became Germany. It was everybody against everybody. It was the Spanish involved. It was the French. It was the Italians. It was these days you struggle to believe it, that Sweden, tiny little Sweden, that IKEA and was it ABBA? That's all we associate with Sweden. Such nice people. These guys were the real warriors at the time. And 30 years. And there was Britain not involved because they were luckily not part of that European mainland. So they were the ones supplying arms to both sides and industrializing in the process. And I said, oh my gosh, this is the real story. If ever there was a dark continent, it was Europe. It was Europe. The light only came on in Europe because of the dividends from and the benefit and the subsidy from the slave trade and slavery. That was the economic subsidy that they got. That was the booster for their economic performance, because the Chinese, Asia was light years ahead of them. India was light years ahead of them. And the one that was most civilized of all, Africans, was Africa. Because we didn't, what were we struggling for? What weapons were we using to keep killing ourselves? Was it the machete? Can you compare it to the guns? Do you understand why it is that they are militarily dominant, and it was possible for them to walk into not just America, not just South America, New Zealand, Australia, and the continent of Africa? The reason it was possible for them to do what they did was that they were the most advanced in the art and science of killing. It's as simple as that. It was the mastery of the arts, the investment, the research, the upskilling of techniques, and the upgrading of weaponry that made their dominance possible. That was the dark continent, where now the light is on 24/7. But the continent that was civilized and stable before those who I call the colonial Confucianists came to trespass into our space was, tell your children, it was Africa.
Now, you made me think about something. Since the Russian-Ukraine conflict started, I think figures are saying that Russia they've lost over 500,000 people. But it's not put out there for the world to see as kind of inhumane behavior from Europeans. We hear, and it's portrayed out in the media when there is a conflict in Africa, that these Africans are again killing themselves. But here we see Europeans, people that claim to have become civilized, that have gone around the world to civilize other people, doing the same killing. Do you think that narrative is lost on us, especially how we are portrayed and how we accept that image of Africa and Africans?
Yes, you see, the narrative war is something that we've been oblivious to. Again, because they were ahead of us in terms of the tools for the conduct of that narrative war, in terms of writing, printing, publishing, and mass communication. And even when some of us tried to tell the story back in the day, take, for example, the book that really set me on my way in terms of understanding the true story of our peoples, The History of the Yoruba by Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson, bear in mind, this book was written at the turn of the century in the 1890s, and it was published early 1900. He never saw his book in published form. He had written this book, The History of the Yoruba, but it was never supposed to see the light of day. And you can imagine this is the days before computers, even typewriters, as it were, written longhand in manuscript. And he sends it off through somebody in Britain in Nigeria, sends it off for it to be printed in England. And they say that it was lost. You can imagine what that did to the man. He never saw the book alive. Those narratives, these are the gatekeepers of the narrative. It was only his brother, the medical doctor, who now, from the manuscripts, the earlier drafts, that he now put it together, knowing the years that his senior brother put into the production of this contribution to the narrative, that He now put it together, and that's what we now have. So you see, the narrative is even more important than what happened, because think about a criminal. When he commits a crime, or he or she commits a crime, what follows? It doesn't just stop with the act. It carries on to when people start saying what happened, the criminal is going to try and control that narrative. He wants you to buy his version of the events, to deflect you from his own culpability. And we haven't appreciated fully the importance of narrative control. And this is something they mastered from a very early stage. So they do the acts. And when they now come to write about those acts, they've got two audiences in mind. They've got their home audience, because bear in mind, their people were not there to see what was being done. Whether it's the slave trade, their people were not there. That's why I don't scattergun blame their people across the board. They're always the actors who do the things. And then, so they've got to write the accounts of what happened for the two audiences, for our people, the victims, and our offspring in the years to come, because we must not know what really happened. Likewise, their own people must not know the true story. But somewhere in there, they keep the records. And we have left the writing to them. And partly because people, when you are sort of tied up in a net, you're busy trying to just get yourself free of that. And that's, our fathers were at that phase. It is now that we're relatively free of that net, or at least some of us. We're now able to set the time aside, but not enough of us are doing it. Too many of us are lazy. We just like to recycle what we've heard. You know, or if we go to our graves just repeating the stories, the propaganda, the lies that were fed to our fathers, we've wasted our intellectualism. We've wasted our learning, because true learning is having the courage to think differently, having the humility to respond and to respect to evidence that's now coming through and presented before you. I've seen some of our people, oh my gosh, you can have the hardest evidence, but because they locked into the followership of a personality or a political party or a left ideology or a right ideology, right-wing or left-wing ideology, they completely disregard the evidence that's before them because the wrong person is saying it, the wrong party is saying it, the wrong person of the wrong wing of the political spectrum is saying it, rather than saying, use your brain, which is the greatest gift that we have. The greatest gift, use it. It's a filter. Trust your own judgment. Don't follow consensus thinking. Have the courage to stand back. And we saw it in evidence in this Ukraine thing, as you reference, where there they are before our very eyes, slaughtering themselves. Every so often a new weapon comes out, whether it's drones that are now being used to bomb nuclear facilities, etc. These are the true barbarians. We were painted as the barbarians, the uncivilized. These are the true barbarians who will always be pushing to reap where they did not sow, take other people's resources, take other people's lands. We as Africans have no record of that, of taking other people's land. Yes, I don't lose sight of the fact that these colonial confusionists will always look for some amongst us who, with their, these are people who lack confidence. They'll go and recruit them. They'll big them up, give them a platform. All of a sudden, they are big players because they are first director of this and first chief executive of this or first leader of that, first black, first black, first black. These are just platforms that they've been given. These are not self-starters. Look at their record. So what have you done before? What have you yourself achieved all by yourself? And you see, I give credit to our opponents. They have an excellent recruitment formula. They know the qualities that they're looking for in those that they elevate. And they know also the ones that they must suppress and shut out. So it's not that we haven't had, we don't have the capability. The capable ones are always there. But as we've now seen from USAID or USAID, whatever you want to call it, how winners are backed and supported. So if you wonder sometimes, okay, how comes this person's got such a high profile, such a huge following? Dig a little more. The Americans, salute to Trump and Musk to that extent, to say, hey, rest of the world, see how we've been playing the game. You know, now you know. Now you know.
So we're going to get to that. I think that's very important. But before then, let me give you a view of this. You know, Ali Mazuri, the Kenyan political scientist, talked about the triple heritage, Africa's triple heritage. Do you think that we've not gone too far, you know, in these new ideas that came, that it's possible to go back? I give you an example. You know, he talked about the coming in of the Arabic culture into Africa. He talked about the Western culture into Africa, and they've crushed the traditional structure. How do you go back to the Africa that was under the influence of these external forces?
Well, you see, as I say, everything starts with confidence. If you say something's impossible, you never get started. Never. But if you have the confidence, if you have the belief, then all you need to do is start. Now, my confidence was high even before I read a book that was given to me by a Lithuanian friend very recently. The book is The History of Lithuania. That is the book. As I said, I was amazed about the story of these peoples, how they were the last in the European landmass. They were the last for so-called civilization to touch them. They were, because of their geographical location, right on the edges of, if you look at the European landmass, right on the edges of Northeast, almost like the backwaters. They were the last for Christianity to touch them. You know, and the book tells the story of how they were regarded as pagans, and their monuments and their places of worship, their own faith system that has sustained them. When Catholicism now came in, all those places of worship were destroyed. The only ones that survived were the ones that they had in their homes, etc. But the public ones were all destroyed. So the same story of, oh, it's ancestor worship. What you need is Christianity. And then the contest between Christianity and the Protestant faith also afflicted them in the same way as in the context of Africa. The foreign faiths, Christianity and Islam, all competing for souls and competing for numbers, because it was always a numbers game between them, that the same tensions arising. And it was only around about the 1600s that Lithuanians actually started to become literate. And in the early stages, the first books were in Polish, not Lithuanian language. And the use of their vernacular language was discouraged. And it was only later on that books now started being produced in Lithuanian. So you see, I look at the story of Lithuania, that, as I said earlier, 2.8 million people that were erased from the map. If you looked at any map of Europe, they weren't there between 1795 and 1915. But look at the map of Europe now. They are there. They are back. And with new confidence. So everything starts with brave thinking, with the restoration of confidence. And the real injury that we've suffered, it's not a loss of material resources, because, you know, they're replaceable by and large. It is the confidence. And that's where the real damage has been done. And that damage, as again, I keep going back to my favorite theme, USAID, how many of our writers, filmmakers were being funded to continue the assault on our confidence, to spin those narratives of the dark continent, of the peoples who were just innately corrupt. Now, through the work we've done in terms of, because you've got to know your opponents, and that's something we weren't doing. You were so busy trying to get out of our hole that we didn't have the time to study those who we were up against. You must know your opponents. It's like sports, it's like football. It's not enough to just be studying your own players. You've got to know how your opponents play. You've got to know their strategies. You've got to know their maneuvers, because when they're going to sell you a dribble, you're able to say, hey, when they line up like that, this is what's going to happen next. Now, I don't understand why we as Nigerians have not transferred the confidence that we have when we're playing football. When we're playing football, we're ready to take on anybody. Is it Brazil? Is it Argentina? We're ready. But when it comes to the place that really matters, the intellectual space, the thinking space, our confidence has been damaged. And it's all due to the narrative war. And I want our people to wake up to that reality, that narrative war is the real source of our destruction. And if you see some of our people joining in that Western negative narrative war against our people, sideline those people. Turn your backs on them. Don't patronize their books. Don't watch their films, because you know whose side they're playing on. I mean, they're wearing the England armband in those circumstances. I don't mind them wearing the England armband if it's football or it's rugby or basketball, whatever. But when it comes to life and death issues, like politics, beware of those ones wearing the captain's armband, and beware even more those ones who are not wearing the armband because they're not showing it. But Dick, be careful.
So we have not even touched on Nigeria. We are yet talking about the global picture, and we're almost an hour into the conversation.
We're coming in.
We're coming in. Yeah, that's the structure of the show. But let me play a video. You made a mention of USAID. Let me play this video and get your take on that, and we continue the conversation.
Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Because your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding. If you think that the program under Operation Enduring Sentinel, entitled Women's Scholarship Endowment, which receives $60 million annually, or the Young Women Lead, which gets about $5 million annually, is going to women, who, by the way, if you read the Inspector General's report, is telling you that the Taliban does not allow women to speak in public. Yet somehow you're believing, and American people are supposed to believe, that this money is going for the betterment of the women in Afghanistan. It is not. You are funding terrorism, and it's coming through USAID. And it's not just Afghanistan, because Pakistan's right next door. USAID spent $840 million in the last 20 years on Pakistan's education-related program. It includes $136 million to build 120 schools, of which there is zero evidence that any of them were built. Why would there be any evidence? The Inspector General can't get in to see them. But you know what? We doubled down and spent $20 million from USAID to create educational television programs for children unable to attend the physical school. Yeah, they can't attend it because it doesn't exist. You paid for it. Somebody else got the money. You are paying for terrorism. This has got to end. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What do you make of this? It's been trending, and a lot of people have comments. What is your own take on that video?
I agree. This has got to end. You see, this is what I mean about the courage to think differently. What the Trump administration has exposed and uncovered is something, if we had true governance and leadership in the Nigerian African space, those exposés should be coming from us. We're the ones who should have been finding the evidence to say, hey, look what they are doing. Look at the sources of what we found about the roots of Boko Haram. But because, as I said, they've put managers in place rather than leaders, because of the confusion that they've created by making us focus on chasing that one seat for a superman or superwoman, we're not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. It's going on all around us. And it is the Americans, the ones who are top of the league, who, because they want to even make themselves, as Trump says, make America great again, it is through the pursuit of their own interests that they're now exposing what we should have found out if we were really if our leaders were really on our side and batting for our people. Now we know how the game is played, and you know, there was I saw on Twitter that the American Vice President Vance, he was speaking in Europe just the other day, speaking on the security issues in Europe, and I was hearing from him something again, that if we had true leadership in Africa, not managers, not overseers of European plantations that were left behind. This is the stuff that we should have been saying, at least to our own people, even if they don't want to hear it. And Vance was saying, you're talking about China and Russia. He said the real threat is within the attack. European leaders, European states are engaging in and indulging in on European, what they call European values. And he referenced elections that were cancelled. I think it was in Bulgaria, that you had elections in Bulgaria, you didn't like the result, and you cancel the result. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like Babangida? That you had election and you don't like the result, you cancel it? So this is what Vance was highlighting, that you the European powers, you're moving away from what is supposed to be your value system. As I said, I always question European values. These are values of civilized societies. These were values of our societies before the colonial Confucianists came in, because we didn't tolerate cheating. You only have to go to the village. We didn't tolerate thieves as leaders. You only have to look at each of our villages and the process by which, back then, chiefs were chosen. the son of a or grandson of a crook could never get there. But now you look at them, and you look at the so-called chiefs, you look at the so-called kings and leaders, and you say, how is this possible? It's because of the USAID factor, whereby the money, all they needed to do is inject resources into the right players. And those players, like a balloon, in a flat condition, there's no air. But when you blow it up and blow it up with dollars, all of a sudden, that's what's visible. And this is how the game was being played. So this is a time for a rethink. The Europeans are now being, there's a sort of a gulf now emerging between America and Europe. And Europe has been the one that has kept the Africa space in that same condition ever since Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. Now, I believe that with the gap that's emerging between them, that, they keep talking about migration. And I'm glad that the migration issue is becoming a problem for them, because it has been a problem for us. They think that we're not concerned about it. We've got so much talent that has been flowing out, leaking out, the talent that should be playing for us, whether you move from something as inconsequential as football, or you move to political leadership. Look at our Kemi Badenoch. If she's good, no doubt about it, she's good to an extent. But if our lands were governed as they should be and structured as they should be, somebody like her would have had the opportunity to play for the home team rather than having to run abroad and play for the opposition. But you see, now they're concerned about migration, immigration, but they're blind to the reality of what's causing the exodus. And the exodus is caused by the policies that organizations like USAID have been pushing, whereby they don't allow other people to just be, to exist, to give them a fair chance to develop their own resources and their own talents. Everything has to be for them. And then they complain when our people say, well, you've destroyed our environment, you've made it unlivable. And so therefore, we're going to find our way across to your space. I'm pleased. There was an article, well, I'm on my friend Kemi Badenoch, that everybody wants to talk about her. Yeah, so let's talk about it. I mean, I subscribe to the Spectator magazine, and the Spectator magazine, for those of you who are not in Britain, is the lead political magazine here, especially for the Conservative Party. And our Kemi, sister Kem, she actually worked for the Spectator magazine. That's the pathway.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. That's the part. You see, Boris Johnson was in the Spectator magazine. The current editor of the Spectator magazine is Michael Gove. Yeah, you know the name, the MP as well. And so this is the back channel through which they smuggle people into politics and power. And this is what Kemi Badenoch was working for the Spectator magazine. I mean, she's a software engineer, but they will find her a job. And that's the process, how you get into the conservative circles in particular. But I got my copy today, just before this interview. And there's a passage in there, which they've clearly, our girl Kemi, you're going to have to come back home. Because what I read in today's edition, okay, let me share it with you. It was a passage as I was reading it, I said, it's Kemi they're talking about. It's at past Pride in Britain. You see? Pride in Britain, it's history. Have I got it right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Pride in Britain, it's history.
Yeah.
And the columnist is one of their regulars. This is what he said. One of the great pretenses of the United Kingdom and Europe for a couple of generations has been that once someone has the paperwork and becomes a citizen, they are as British as anyone else. It is a nicety, partly borrowed from America, but a nicety nonetheless. If my parents had chosen to emigrate to Pakistan in the 1970s, and I had been born in Pakistan, would I really feel Pakistani? Would I take pride in my identity? Would I feel the same pride as people whose families had lived in the country all their lives? I would have thought not. And I think most Pakistanis would agree with me. In fact, I suspect they were regarded as somewhat audacious if I were to try to claim to have been part of their history. For some reason, it is different the other way around. Yet it isn't. When someone whose family has been here for generations says, we, you know that they are speaking not just on their own behalf or on behalf of everyone else in the country, but on behalf of their forebears. If I refer to the time when we defeated Hitler, saw off the Kaiser, or beat Napoleon, I'm not saying so because I had any role in these battles, but because my ancestors did. And I feel deep pride in and gratitude for that fact. Can someone whose ancestors do not come from this country feel the same pride? If their forebears were Commonwealth soldiers, very possibly. But otherwise, I don't believe it is common. Kemi, you better pack your bags, girl. You're coming back home. That's the reality.
Below the belt.
That's
Now, but you know, there are so many ways to go with this story. My grandfather fought during the Second World War. Should I also be proud that we defeated Hitler for the British Empire? Is it? Well, anyway, let's leave Kemi and is to take us so far away from Nigeria, and I want to get back to your book. So now we have Nigeria. You said earlier on that Nigeria is more like a template of Africa that is not working for everybody. You can go to Rwanda, go to Burundi, and it's the same story. You go to Congo. But when you look at Nigeria now, and you've been able to say that you found the culprits, the people who put it in that situation. I don't want to go to football analogy, because I could say, like you mentioned, I know you are a big fan of the Arsenal, and I know that they have been winning, and they know their opponents, and they know the style of their opponents. They know. Is it the same thing with Africa, where we know the opponents? We know the Western countries. We are talking about USAID. We also know that the British Empire, they did the same thing. They used the same templates. This is not the first time we know that external people are influencing things in Africa, but we have not been able to resist it or prepare for it. And as we speak, we don't know what the Chinese are doing. Maybe another 30 years or 40 years, we'll say, oh, we didn't know that this newspaper was put up there by the Chinese. So how do you confront a situation like this?
Yeah, you see, it's a bit like, when we say we know, it goes back to that critical word, we. What do we mean by that? One or two of us know because we've done the reading and the research. Does that make the we? It doesn't, because you see, they always say that democracy is a game of numbers. And it is. It's a numbers game. But likewise, change, and especially revolutionary change in the political context, is a game of numbers. How many of us are there? Just a few of us is not the we. And one of the things that we really need to take stock of, we need humility, especially in the intellectual circles. The few of us who know then think that that is the we. Hell no, it isn't. It's a game of numbers. You've got to get more people on board. And there comes a point, it's not that you don't have to have everybody on board, but you need that critical mass. And then the challenge becomes, how do those of us who know get more across? Well, it's through dialogues and discussions like this. This is why this platform is so valuable. It's through talking to ourselves, discussing. When you hear somebody recycling a story, a narrative, a version of events that you heard 5 years ago, 10 years ago, equip yourself with participation in programs like this to question, challenge them, do the research, do the reading, because it's almost like a process of, the analogy of immunization. What were they trying to do through the COVID exercise when they had us all locked down? They wanted to immunize and inoculate as many people as possible. The inoculation that we need urgently is the inoculation against political ignorance, because it's political ignorance that they use to dance on our heads. When they say, hey, go and collect your PVC, everybody rush out to collect the PVC, and they give you options, all bad options, because all the bad options, there's no real new thinking coming from them. Listen to them carefully. They're just saying, I will do things differently. Check their ideology, check their philosophy, find out what they've written, what they've read. We don't do that because they know it's a numbers game. And they know that the numbers game is against those who actually do the research, who do the thinking, who participate in programs like this. Because that's how the colonial Confucianists set Nigeria up to fail. I'm looking at your banner. Who set up Nigeria for failure? And people say, so you keep blaming the British. Well, I do with good reason. Because, again, USAID is telling us now, this is how the game is played. You think it's played this way. But look underneath and see what's really going on. You weren't supposed to know. It's only now in their own interests, in the interest of making America great again, and so you're wasting taxpayers' money because you're giving funding to Boko Haram and this, that, and the other, that now we're beginning to say, oh, maybe Dele is right. Maybe there is this external factor going on. Now, as I said, it is a game of numbers. We need to inoculate and immunize so many more. And I always say I always reference the work of the missionaries who brought Christianity, their version of Christianity. And likewise, their counterparts on the Islamic front. How did they win the converts, whether to Christianity or to Islam? How did they detach us from our own faiths and our own leaders and our own value systems? We've got to do the reprogramming by using their techniques. It was conversations. It was missionary activities. We must all be missionaries. Reach out to the neighbor. Reach out to the next person. Speak to them. Engage them. Become like a Jehovah's Witness. You know the Jehovah's Witness who come knocking on your door when you're in you may be in the bath and you think it's a parcel that's been delivered, and then your doorbell rings and you run downstairs half naked and you open the door and it's a Jehovah's Witness, and you say, oh my gosh, that's what you got to be. You got to be a nuisance in terms of spreading this new gospel that Africa, this ain't our story. This is not where the continent story finishes. That we've got a new narrative now that we know. Now that we know, we just the what next? You get many more, so that we be very careful about it. Many more must know, such that there comes a point you've got the critical mass, and then the change comes effortlessly.
I've had intellectuals come on this show, and sometimes people blame them for whatever is the failure of Africa, because you're talking about we knowing that they know but they've not been able to communicate to the masses what they know. And they are also the people believe they are being used by these empires, Western structure of power, to control what's happening at home. I want to use an example of South Africa, what's going on now today in South Africa, where you have Trump pressing South Africa because of two things. Trump wants them to preserve white privileges over land, and also because of their role in Israel's issue with the International Criminal Courts. We know that maybe South Africa can, but not all countries will be able to withstand pressure from a big country like United States. And we know what happened in Zimbabwe when Zimbabwe tried to redistribute land. The same thing could happen in South Africa if America could convince the Western powers to all agree that South Africa must not let them keep the land, let the white people lose the land. So when you say that, one, that we know the information, we're able to put it out there and get masses to sign up to that, can we, if we are under pressure from the big nations, be able to withstand it?
Yeah, I believe we can. I believe we can. We just need to adjust our value systems. I think, they've dragged us along in their game, their value system of celebrating wealth, regardless of the story by means that wealth was acquired. This person is a billionaire. This person is the richest man in Nigeria or richest man in Africa. You don't know his story, because when you scratch underneath, I know there are no billionaires without crookery. That's just the reality. If you see a billionaire, you've seen a crook. It doesn't really matter. You've seen a crook. They may later on find an honest enterprise from which they make their extra money, but check their story, you'll find a crook. And that has been the Western model. And that's what they exported to us. And so we end up celebrating not the journey. Our focus is we're celebrating the destination and the position. They empower, they're in office. It doesn't matter how they got there. We just got to switch that narrative back to who we really are. Go back to valuing what we really value. Now, tying it into Trump and what he's saying and what Elon Musk. You see, I can take bits from people. One of the mistakes we make is that because we focus on personality and a messenger rather than a message, we either disregard everything somebody says or we swallow everything somebody says. Now, you've heard me saying in relation to Trump and Elon Musk, applauding what they're doing as far as USAID is concerned. Yeah. But on the other hand, I can see what they're up to, what is driving them. And what is driving them in the context of what they're saying in South Africa, which links to Israel, which links to their agenda for America. This is settler colonialism. This is settler politics. That is the thread that runs all the way through. Israel, take another man's land and put your people in there. America, take another people's land and put your people in there. South Africa, another people's land and put your people in there. So you can now make sense of what they are doing and what they are saying. That's the thread that runs through. Now, once again, this is where the immunization, the inoculation against ignorance that comes from education. This is where it now empowers you to deal with whoever it is. Doesn't matter how strong they are physically. Doesn't matter. The greatest inspirational story that we as Africans have never fully been exposed to We were ignorant of it, and we still largely are ignorant of it. The greatest story of all is the story of Haiti. The people who abolished slavery. I mean, again, this is what I mean about the narrative war. The narrative war, it was the Haitians, the Africans in Haiti, you and I, that were taken out of the west coast of Africa, planted against our will, dumped in Haiti. They were the ones who fought their slavers with the weapons that they were able to get hold of, fought and freed themselves. And of course, that narrative had to be killed. The narrative had to be controlled because they knew that that would inspire everybody else and empower and uplift everybody else whose confidence they're damaged. This is what I explained in A Slave Ship Called Jesus. It was the Africans who freed themselves from slavery. The Africans in America they were told, fight for us. When we win, you are free. Now, as an enslaved person, and you say, here's the bargain. Put your life on the line, put my life on the line, and then I'm free. Our people stood up, signed up for that. And at the end of it, that's how they freed themselves. But who tells that story? I've told the story in The Slave Ship Called Jesus. I told the story of Haiti, how those guys fought and won their freedom. And even after they won their freedom, you know what? The Napoleon, Bonaparte himself, he couldn't accept that outcome. And what did he do? He made peace with Britain. And in order to be able to send the whole of the French army in against Haiti with no distraction. And it was a fight to the finish, no mercy. It was brutal slaughter. And the Africans won. That was what put the frighteners up, all the slavers in the various plantations across the world. When the story got out of how the Africans won in Haiti, and how Haiti now became African. It was French. It became African in consequence of that no mercy fight to the finish. We've got nothing to lose. And it was the fear of repetition of that in other plantations because of the ratio of enslaved to slavers that said, we need to shut this thing down. Now, that is the, you see the uplifting, confidence restoring, inoculating powers of learning, of real education. We just spend too much time chasing the dollar, chasing the pound, chasing the next 10,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds. Whereas what we really need, what our people really need, is the restoration of confidence. That spine surgery needs to be done to restore the spine, refix it, reset it, such that we can now begin to play to our potential. And then, you know, we'll just be like everybody else, like Singapore, you know. It's the miracle started in Singapore only after they had the courage to say this isn't working. Now, there's so many of our intellectuals who are invested in the narrative of saying it is working, just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. Don't believe them.
All right, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have you zero in on some issues in Nigeria. I want to hear what you think about the Sultan and Sharia law and panels in the Southwest. There's a push to have Sharia in the Southwest. Also, there was an attempt to create states in Nigeria that is going on in the National Assembly. And we have about 31 new states suggested. which we get into what you are talking about in terms of if Nigeria is dissolved, what happens. So I want to hear your view on that. And then, of course, the issue of Nnamdi Kanu and the Nigerian judicial system. You weigh in on that. And of course, the final one is Pa Adebanjo, who died yesterday. Some people are saying that may be one of the last nationalists that anybody will be called a nationalist in Nigeria. What does that mean for the country? So we take a break, we come back, we get you to weigh in on those things, and then we let our people in so that they can be part of this conversation. Thank you so much, Dele.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. We're having an interesting conversation with Dele Ogun, who is the author of the new book they call Praise. So, Dele, let's get to Nigeria and some of the issues in the news in Nigeria. Yesterday, we know Ayo Adebanjo died at the age of 96. A lot of people considered him one of the last of nationalists in Nigeria. What do you make of that idea of someone being seen as a nationalist? There are a lot of young people today who look at it as a bad tag on anybody. What do you think? And what do you think about Adebanjo himself and his role in Nigerian history?
Yes, well, thank you for that. First of all, yes, I pay my respects to Pa Ayo Adebanjo. I had the honor to meet with him on 2 occasions in recent times. One to present him with a copy of my History of Nigeria, A Fatherless People. And the other was at a meeting that I had with Professor Banji Akintoye, where I was able to sit round the table with these heavyweights. And these are gentlemen and women who tried their own best. They are of a generation, the Awolowo and Ahuru generation, who tried for us within the limits of the resources and the information that was then available to them. So I salute their effort. The responsibility now passes to those who are left behind. They had their innings, and they tried the best that they could in the circumstances. And so, yeah, I salute them. In terms of nationalists, you see a lot of confusion comes from that word, because we lawyers are always very careful in the definition of terms. You know, what do you mean by nationalists? What is the nation that underpins that nationalism? Some refer to the nation as Nigeria. And from what I knew of Pa Adebanjo, the nation for him was Nigeria. He was one who wanted to get the best out of the legacy that we had been left with, this Nigeria construct. And that's why he was not one who played the politics of petty, I use the term tribalism, but again, that is misleading, because the tribes who are competing for that one seat in the Nigerian nation, these are actually nations. So you see, there are layers of nationalism, and it's a question of what level are you playing at. If you're a nationalist, there's some who, as I said, like Chief Adebanjo, that the nation was Nigeria. There are others of us who say that the nation is not Nigeria. Nigeria is a country. Nigeria is a state. The nations are those who were thrown into Nigeria by the culprits. The nations are Yoruba, Hausa, Ijo, Ogoni, Kanuri. Those are the nations. And that's where the real nationalists are. And nationalism, again, has been used as a dirty word by those who are trying to promote the Western stroke European agenda of stay as you are, stay as we made you, because anything else is the politics of hatred. of pettiness. Whereas in Europe, the politics they play is that politics of lower level nation, organic nation, the politics of being Welsh, being Scottish, being Irish, being English. But without, it doesn't mean that you stop being British. You can be both. It is all right to wave your Welsh flag in Britain. Whereas we say, if you wave the flag of Yoruba nation, you're a separatist. You hate everybody else. You want to break the place up. Why do I go back to the theme of us trying to be better than everybody else? We're only human, and it's a natural human sentiment that these ties of loyalty, they start from the lowest cell. It starts from your family. It moves up to your wider family, cousins and relations. It moves up to your community, and then moves up to your village, and it moves up. That is just human nature. The rest of the world understand that. They're comfortable with being German and European. It's those, the mavericks, the ones who really are just servants of the European Confucianists, the colonial Confucianists, who want to try and make us uncomfortable with our organic and God-given identities, and say we must never mention these nations that sustained us for the thousands of years before the colonial Confucianists came in and caused their confusion. Nationalists, it depends at what level. We say it doesn't have to be either or. You can be a nationalist at your organic level and still be a good Nigerian in inverted commas. That's my analysis, and it ties into what we're doing to somebody like Nnamdi Kanu at the moment, where it's because we fear we're not prepared to allow for the reality that it is okay to be Igbo, and if you like, it's okay to be Biafran and Nigerian. If you force them to say it's one or the other, and somebody chooses to be Biafran and to encourage his people to buy into the Biafran identity, and because that is your threat, you see it as a threat to your perpetuation of the colonial Confucianist Nigeria agenda. You say you lock him up, he must not be heard, and you imprison him, and you're afraid to try him. If you've got the evidence, try him. You're the one who lacks confidence when you behave like that. It's a bit like the hoo-ha over Dele Ogun recently, to say, if you've got a case, bring it out. Otherwise, keep quiet. So likewise, in terms of if you have a case against him and you have confidence in that case against him, it's time to let him out. His case only gets stronger the longer you keep him in there.
Now, let me ask you, there was this effort at the National Assembly to create new states. It's still ongoing, but people were shocked that the recommendation was 31 new states. Now, following your own ideology about what should be done in Nigeria, if we should go back to our, say, ethnic groups to begin from there in terms of relationship with the country, don't you think that we are going to have over 200 nation states? People say people who critique that position always say, how manageable is that, especially for the smaller ethnic groups? How would they be able to function as a nation?
You know, there's a fundamental difference between the Orange Union proposal, whereby we respect the organic nations, 371 or however many of them, because those ethnic groups and nations existed as at 1900, before the colonial Confucianists came in. So they had a track record of governing themselves, of running their own affairs. It was simply taken away from them in the process of the creation of the project of Nigeria. The proposal, on the other hand, of Nigeria as constructed by the colonial Confucianists, and we now want to create, having 36 arbitrary states. If you look at the lines, the way they drew the lines in the creation of those states, it was exactly what happened on a smaller scale. It was exactly what happened at Berlin Conference, where the lines were drawn to cut different groupings, natural organic groupings, to cut them and create hydra-headed monsters in the process. And what they are proposing to do, those driving the Nigeria project on behalf of the European Confucianists, is to create 31 more eating centers, not centers of production, not centers of development, because none of these states are centers of development as we have them. They simply go and collect money from the center. They collect pocket money, their spending allowance. Like we used to go to our parents then, and they give us an allowance to go and spend for the week or for the month. This is what these states, as designed by and drawn up by the overseers of the Nigerian plantation, that's what they are. Nothing organic. It's top down, and such that they have no roots. In the Orange Union, you're going back to governance structures and their roots. The money flow will not be top down. Go and collect your spending allowance in Abuja or wherever at the end of each month. You will primarily depend on your own resources. It will be bottom up, so it's organic. And those who are managing your funds will now know where the money is coming from, because it's coming bottom up, not top down. So that's the fundamental difference between this. When you have an artificial structure, let me use this analogy. I was in Landmark Village recently in Lekki, Oniru, and there's a house which is a tourist attraction there. It's called the Upside Down House. And when you go into that house, everything is upside down. So the stairs are upside down. If you can imagine, the furniture is on the ceiling. Yes, the furniture is on the ceiling, the carpets are on the ceiling. Even when you go into the kitchen, the cabinet units, they're all on the ceiling. And you get this strange sensation when you're in that house to say, oh, this thing doesn't right. Even as you're walking.
People live there?
No. It was an architect that came up with the concept. Please go there. It's the upside down house. That is Nigeria. It is the upside down house. So things are coming from the top downwards rather than from the bottom upwards. And any house that you build, if you build it top down, it can never be as strong and solid as one that you build bottom up. Orange Union is bottom up. These Apple Union that they've got, where they're slicing the apple into more and more states, can never work. So go and see that house, the upside down house. That's Nigeria for you.
I will. So let me get you to weigh in on this issue. Recently, there were people pushing for Sharia in the Southwest, and they said it's for the benefit of people in the Southwest who are Muslims. And the Sultan of Sokoto weighed in. In the reaction, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Professor Banji Akintoye. He issued a statement where he essentially said to the Sultan that you don't have, there's no Islamic law that gave you power or control over people, Muslims in the Southwest, and that you didn't say anything when Fulani herdsmen were killing people in the Southwest. Why are you talking now? This week we saw stories that imams in the Southwest picked a day for Ramadan. So right there, they are saying that we are not going to wait for the Sultan to issue a day that all Muslims in the country will observe the Ramadan. So which goes into what you've been talking about the structure of the country and how things before the colonial people got there, the people in the Southwest were running their own affairs. So where do you think, if your proposal, this idea, which is also connected to the idea of national sovereign, national conference, if it's not done, where do we go if we continue on the trajectory that we are?
Well, you see, these things are all a product of a winner-takes-all system, where you concentrate power at the center through this, what I've called the Apple Union, this upside-down house. You concentrate it at the center, and as a result, the focus is grabbing the controls at the center, because once you control the center, you can now cascade down all your own value systems. Whoever captures the power at the center, whether overnight or gradually, Operation Creep, their value systems get pushed down through those control networks. And that is what you see going on as far as the Islamization of Nigeria is concerned. It's a softly catch your monkey by the tail strategy, where you creep up, and most of the advances tend to be made when there's nominally a southerner in power. Now, it goes back to the opening video sequence, the point that I explained in the book, that it was the colonial Confucianists. I never blame the caliphate as such, because people say, yeah, you love blaming the British, but there's a reason, because the house was built by Jack. You know, for those who don't know, Jack is a very common British name. This was the house that Jack built. Jack built it as the upside down house. Jack intentionally, consciously decided to make it a country that had conflicting value systems in terms of faith. That's why they went out of their way. Joseph Chamberlain went out of his way to ensure that the Sokoto Caliphate was brought into what they were constructing. They had constructed it up until 1900. Sokoto was not theirs. It was actually supposed to be part of Niger. It was supposed to be part of French Niger. But because they needed that conflict built in, it went out of their way to bring the Sokoto Empire in. And worse than that, they conquered Sokoto first. Having conquered Sokoto, they now replaced the leadership of the Sokoto Caliphate and they converted the Sokoto Caliphate into what was really the British Caliphate in a sort of Anglo-Caliphate alliance. And that is why on the cover of the book, you see that star with the crown inside it. That symbol is what represents the alliance between the caliphate and the crown. You could see the crown, the Tudor crown, in the center with the seal of Solomon inside it. Now, for those who don't know, you might say, what's the seal of Solomon got to do with the caliphate? But the caliphate was one of the Abrahamic faiths. It is one of the Abrahamic faiths. So that seal is the symbol of the caliphate. And you could see the fusion of agendas represented by that image. So I don't blame the caliphate, because they themselves are not in control. They are being controlled. And part of their agenda is, as far as they're concerned, the religionists amongst themselves, is using the opportunity created and given to them by the British to push the religious agenda further and further and further. So that's what you see going on in the Southwest. And this is why we must urgently, you asked me the question, project forward. What's going to happen? If we don't change course, if we don't return urgently to installing the circuit breakers that will keep and contain value systems in the spaces where they belong, and we have an open plan living, then it's going to be inevitable that Nigeria becomes formally an Islamic state. That's the way I see it. It's not that I sometimes hear some intellectual commentators in the South say, "Oh, the Caliphate are just strategically brilliant, and strategic genius is how they got to." Nonsense. Total nonsense. The strategic genius behind their advancement, they were conquered by the British in the space of, Sokoto fell in the space of 24-hour battle. What kind of strategic genius is that? The strategic genius is the British, who converted and adopted the Caliphate into their vehicle. As I explained in the book, they did the same in South Africa. They conquered the Boers, and having conquered them, they changed their leadership and now appointed them as the local overseers of South Africa. It's an old formula. You conquer those who aspire to lead, and then you put your own people there, but you keep the shell. So the reason why I can be relaxed as far as the Islamists and those in northern Nigeria, etc., is because I know it is not their doing. It's not their genius. Wasn't even their agenda. It was Joseph Chamberlain who dragged them into the Nigeria space, and then handed the keys to them. When the time came, it was Macmillan, Harold Macmillan, who handed the keys to them formally to look after the plantation. So our quarrel is not with each other.
Now, put on your hat as a lawyer and tell me this, what you think about this. A Muslim who lives anywhere in the country, not just in the Southwest, who decides that he wants or she wants to be some of the affairs of his life or her life to be governed by Islamic dictates, something like they were calling for what they call Sharia panel. So if they want to have a divorce or something to do with inheritance, that they want that to be under the Sharia guidance. What's wrong with that?
My response is this: as a lawyer, is a bit like a computer. It will have an operating system. I'm not aware of any computer that has a dual operating system at the same time, simultaneously. And so therefore, if one operating system doesn't work for you, you change it. Yeah, you change it. Now, applying that to your analogy, if that Muslim says that the values by which I wish to live my life are such that Sharia law should govern my every existence and my interaction with fellow citizens, what he should do is move to the Sharia territory. In the Orange Union, there will be some segments that will, and they'll be free to have the Sharia law system. But it's like that Muslim deciding to live in London or America, and he says, I need Sharia law to govern my life. Common sense says, hey, mate, you got a choice. Off you go. Go and live in a system that suits what you want. Don't try and change this place for the rest of us to live according to your value system. So you see, the beauty of the Orange Union is this: it allows live and let live. It's not a winner takes all system. We can respect what each of us wants. We can all be winners, rather than there's only one way of life. I hate oneness. One way of life, one faith, one system, one winner. No, we're cleverer than that. And the Orange Union is re-engineering of our union, because we know that our people naturally want union. We don't naturally hate each other. We weren't hating each other like that before the colonial Confucianists came with their stuff, whether politically or in terms of faith, whether Christian or Islamic. It was live and let live, good neighborliness. Orange Union gives us that. Everybody can be what they want to be in their own space. But the open plan living that this Nigeria structure has left us, it only leads to enmity, hatred, conflict, bloodshed, regression. And that cannot be the lot of Africans going forward 140 years after the Berlin Conference. It must end.
All right. We're going to invite our people to come in. While they are coming in, I want you to, how is the book doing in out there? How is it doing? And yeah, what is...
It's been well received. I mean, our people, what I find, they do want to know, they do want to understand, and the early feedback. I don't know if I think you might be able to open one of those reviews there for people to see the reviews. People are excited about it. You know, that's why I say that you know, our time has come, and it's unusual. The book is unusual for a book to have a soundtrack, and the soundtrack for this book, this is because I used to be a DJ. You see, that was my people don't know that my first enterprise was as a DJ. I used to run a sound system, and back in the day when I was young, and you know, some of the lyrics, when you listen to them, they are so powerful and uplifting. And the one that we adopted for the book is the McFadden and Whitehead. You remember that one?
Yes, yes.
Rudolf, you're betraying your age at this point.
No. I don't hide. I know that I played it. It's just that I don't have the right to play it on this show. I will have
well, I know you don't, but I've got the lyrics, and it's ain't no stopping us now.
Yeah.
And you remember the line, there's been so many things that's held us down, but now it looks like things are finally coming around. I know we've got a long, long way to go. And where we'll end up, I don't know.
I don't know.
But we won't let nothing hold us back. We're putting ourselves together. We're polishing up our act. If you felt we've been held down before, I know you refuse to be held down anymore. Don't you let nothing stand in your way. I want you all to listen. Listen to every word I say. Every word I say. And then the other stanza that I love from it is this bit. And it's for all the negative people. And we know in Nigeria, we've got those negative people, don't we? Yeah. And this bit is talking to them. It says, I know you know someone that has a negative vow. And if you're trying to make it, they only push you aside. They really don't have nowhere to go. Ask them where they're going. They don't know. But we won't let nothing hold us back. We're going to put ourselves together. We're going to polish up our act. And if you've ever been held down before, I know you refuse to be held down anymore. Don't you let nothing stand in your way. I want you all to listen. Listen to every word I say. Every word I say. Ain't no stopping us now. And we say, we've got the book. We got the book. Ain't no stopping us now. So yeah, that's the soundtrack. The book that has a soundtrack is a very unusual book.
That's wonderful, wonderful. So I read the reviews from Amazon. There were other people who were saying that we've come of age, that they made reference to the Christian idea of when you are born, you are baptized, and when you get to a certain age, you go through what they call confirmation, which is where you now come out on your own and say, I'm ready to say I want to be a Christian on my own. So they use that as a way to say that Africa has got to the age where we have to come out on our own and say, this is what we want to do, so that we don't say it's our parents that put us into this Christianity. It's our parents that did this. So they use that as a metaphor to say, we've got to the point where we don't have to say that, oh, it's the white people, it's the Europeans that did this to us, that we can chart our own path. What do you say to that?
I agree, precisely because we've now got the book. Ain't no stopping us now. All the stuff that they've been hiding is all exposed in the book, and now assisted, as I said, all along through this discussion, by the revelations by the Trump administration in terms of USAID. So we now know how the game is played. But again, we must be careful about the word we. The few of us in this conversation are not the we. Some of us now know, and now armed with that knowledge, yes, we've now come of age. We've now, when I was born into a Christian family, my mother's the head of a church, and I followed as a child, went to church every Sunday. I sat at the back, listening to the vicar, listening to the sermon, listening to the readings, but I was listening carefully and critically. And as I listened and as I read the passages, I said to myself, I'm not sure I buy the whole of the story. I know that they're good stuff in there. They're good passages. They're inspirational messages and lessons. But there's no way I'm swallowing the whole of this. This story doesn't add up. And so I got to the point, having been introduced to the faith, where I now had to beat my own path, decide what I was rejecting and what I was accepting. And it's now incumbent upon us, a new generation. The Pa Adebanjo has left the stage. A new generation now comes through. If all we do is simply repeat and regurgitate and recycle and rehearse all that generation were doing, if we lack ambition, if we can't find the confidence to move the discussion and the narrative forward, then all our education is a waste. But I believe that we're greater than that. And I believe that, I sincerely believe the lyrics of the soundtrack to this book. There ain't no stopping us now. Now we know. And it's now, it's now over to us.
All right. Thank you so much, Dele. Let's go to our audience. And first on the list is Forefathers. Forefathers, welcome to the show.
Greetings, Dr. Damages, for having me, and greetings to all the panelists listening on the chat and the viewers, and special greetings to the guest, Dele Ogun, and thank you for joining us today. The last time you were here, there was a lot of ruckus because some people thought I was being a bit unfair with my questioning. But from hearing from you today, you've reinforced the point I was making. People don't understand what you say, that you come from the point of view of an ethno-nationalist, but you don't state it openly. And what I find within our discourse is that we struggle with identity in Nigeria. What I mean by that is we all have different identities. We are fathers, husbands, Igbo, Nigerian, black man, doctor. We have different identities, and most of them, as in Nigerians, we navigate them fine. But when it comes to our national identity, many of our intellectuals, many of our elites struggle with that, and they toxify it. And this is why it seems like many people hate or a kind of revolt against their national identity. When they hear nationalism, it's like a dirty word. And that is the same behavior that you can see from Kemi Badenoch, that when she was condemning Nigeria, she forgot that inside Nigeria is Yoruba people that she claimed to cherish too. And I see the same, I hear the same kind of similarity with the way you speak about ideas. And regarding your, the breadth of your knowledge, that is without a doubt. I mean, there is a lot of factual stuff you stated in those reports and your books and everything else. But the conclusions you are reaching, I consider them extremely dangerous. Extremely. The reason why that is because we are facing a world today. You are aware of the enlightenment of the Europeans. And they have now moved. The enlightenment is just a way of acquiring knowledge, the certainty of knowledge. They are now evolving to a point whereby they are creating new ways of acquiring knowledge. We are talking about AIs, AI, artificial intelligence, and building sensors that are as large as cities. And we are still talking about ethno-nationalities. That is an existential threat for us if we carry on thinking like that. That is why I consider it extremely dangerous. Because even in the UK, we have ethno-nationalities in the UK, and yet they went on to conquer the world. Some of them were forced, some of them joined mutually. Even in England itself, there are still ethno-nations in England, even if they don't make a lot of noise. Like people like the Cornish, the Northumbria people, they have different people that could have been making a lot of noise. But you know what they understand? They have multiple identities. When it comes to operating as a nation, they don't allow their tribal, their ethno-nationality to deprive the nation of progress, because they understand that when that nation succeeds, they all succeed. Like the way England, the entire United Kingdom and Britain, they're all succeeding today. And I think our elites, they fail to understand that. The title that Dr. Damages put here today was about the Berlin Conference. That Berlin Conference was reflecting another example of how Europeans can think at a higher level. They fought each other for a very long time. They had their 100 years wars, and yet they are still able to understand that at the higher level, they have a common interest in coming together and do stuff together. So that is another example of what Europeans are capable of doing, that we seem to struggle. And I really wish you were advocating a higher level of us coming together to do stuff, because all you seem to be talking about is ethno nations. And you said something about this, we didn't used to fight each other. We fought each other. The Yoruba people were fighting each other for 100 years before you white man came and put them out of their misery. For 100 years, they were fighting each other. So
all right.
when we want to go back to that, so the question is, I really wish you can go back and forth on this, because this is quite an important conversation. So I will ask the question: his vision that he's painting for our Nigerians, a lot of them adore you. I can assure you that, because I've not had the end of it from the last session. How does it get us from where we are right now to meet the challenges that I described? The humongous challenges that the other groups that got us to this position have even gotten stronger while we are talking about ethno-nationalities. How does your ideas get us out of this mess? Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that. And welcome back, forefathers. Now, look, you said that last time I was here, that there was a lot of, I forget the language, there was a lot of raucous. No, there wasn't. It was simply maybe your use of language in this sense. As I recall, you were bold enough to say that I was wrong. Yeah, I'm glad you recall. But you see, all you were really saying was that you don't agree. There's a world of difference between saying that somebody who's done their research and written the books and put it out there for everybody to go and check it out. And when I write almost as if I'm arguing a case, because I'm a trial lawyer. And we trial lawyers, you need evidence, you need authority for whatever you are saying. And so I adopt that style when I write these works of history. And I back everything that I say with evidence. So to then, without somebody having done similar research, to almost act as an expert and say, on the basis of what I know, you are wrong. You could see why some of your colleagues were a bit upset with you. But I knew that what you were really meant to say was that you don't agree. And it's clear that you still don't agree. So let's take what you said bit by bit. First of all, to suggest that Dele Ogun and Kemi Badenoch, same kind of thing, I don't think you're listening to me. Because Kemi Badenoch and I could not be more different, in the sense that she was born in England and raised in Nigeria, primary school, secondary school, and then chose to wear England's armband as leader of the Her Majesty's or His Majesty's opposition, playing for England. I was born in Nigeria, and my primary school was in England, and my secondary school was in England, and my university was in England, and my first professional calling was in England. But I choose to play for Nigeria. So I don't know where you get the basis for saying I'm like Badenoch. I'm batting for our people. I'm trying to restore the confidence in our people against, as I'm always accused of blaming Badenoch's team. So how on earth I can be equated with Badenoch?
Because she supports ethno-nationalistic, she has a ethno-nationalistic way of thinking. Yeah. And that's how you come across too.
Okay, let me explain that then, because you talk about ethno-nationalism. And you say, but I don't state it openly. It's what I wrote down from your comments. I don't state it openly. I don't know how much more open can I be when people know me as a Yoruba nationalist who set up the Yoruba Foundation, who initiated the Yoruba National Day celebration in the year 2000 that has been going on ever since. Can I be more open as to where I'm coming from?
Your supporters don't think that. That's the problem. They don't believe that. When I tell them, they don't believe that. That the way you sound like somebody that is for Yoruba Nation.
The way I am for Yoruba Nation.
Exactly. But they don't believe that. They think you are like...
I don't know who you're talking to, but the people who speak to me, and follow me, they know this guy makes no apology about it at all. I am first and foremost, before anything else, I'm Yoruba. But what I wish, I'm a different kind of Yoruba nationalist. I'm not of the stock that hate other nations and nationalities and ethnic groups because they're in a winner-takes-all game that the British set up for us, such that we want to dominate and control. I am the kind of nationalist that says live and let live. I don't think I could have been clearer. That is the essence of the Orange Union that I've been preaching. So whoever you're speaking to and are saying, oh no, I said it at the beginning, my difference with Pa Adebanjo of now blessed memory is that nation for him is Nigeria. For me, Nigeria is a country, is a state, is an artificial construct. I couldn't be clearer. The nation is that of our ancestors. And I could not be more different from Badenoch because I'm a conservative with a small c. She's a conservative with a capital C. And the essence of conservatives with small c's is that they revere their past. They revere the legacy of their ancestors. She's a political conservative. I'm a natural conservative. And that's why I hold on to what our ancestors gave us before the colonial Confucianists came along to try and say, forget Yoruba, forget Igbo, forget Ijo, forget Ogoni, forget Hausa, etc. Nigeria is which is what the school of thought that you belong in. I've got that very clear. Now, you say that my conclusions, they're extremely dangerous. I laugh at that. Dangerous to what? It's only dangerous to one Nigerian. To one Nigerianist.
To our very survival. No, see, Nigeria is just a construct, just like Yoruba. I think we like to think that these ethno nations that we have is sacred. It's not. They are all social constructs too. But in terms of this thing, why it's dangerous to us is that we don't organize ourselves as it relates to the world of today and dealing with the challenges that are coming, even greater challenges. And we are facing existential threat. And I expect our elites to understand these things. That is my problem. That's why I consider it extremely dangerous, because you are one of the foremost writers in the country.
No, you only consider it extremely dangerous because it's dangerous to your point of view and your school of thought. You see the choice of language? Extremely dangerous. It sounds like it's an objective assessment. No, it's only dangerous to your philosophy, your school of thought. Why is it extremely dangerous? Isn't that, as I've explained, the Orange Union formula is what the colonial Confucianists are using for themselves? You said that the Enlightenment of the Europeans, they're evolving into new ways of thinking. Do you know why they're able to evolve into new ways of thinking like AI, etc.? It's because they've settled the identity issues. After their Westphalia nonsense, after that 30 years war where they were all fighting each other, it is out of that the nations, Germany came through. Yes, Germany came through. France settled down. New identities came popping through. That's where these nations came from, because they built up to the ultimate of oneness. Yes, which was the Holy Roman Empire. That's where they had. They had the Holy Roman Empire that ran all those countries like Austria and Germany and what we now know as Germany, but it was Prussia and all the rest of that. So they settled it. Likewise in Britain, They rose to a pinnacle of the equivalent of one Nigeria, where the English Parliament, Westminster, ran the whole of what they called the United Kingdom, the Union of the Crowns. Yeah, James I and James VI. James I of England, James VI of Scotland. They united the territory under that king. But where did they come to afterwards? Tony Blair, remember him? He now introduced the constitutional settlements, whereby he was now able to give each their own space. The Welsh Assembly for the Welsh to run their affairs. The Scottish Parliament for the Scottish to run their affairs. The troublesome Northern Ireland, they got their own assembly. So you see what the medicine that they took, forefathers, is what you're seeking to deny our people, because you're saying it's dangerous.
Sorry,
it really hasn't damaged them.
I think we are cross. Let me exchange now. We don't get this
opportunity. Forefathers, we don't have all day.
Okay,
we have given you enough time. If we have the chance, I'll give you a second chance. But let's go to other people, okay? All right.
Let me just deal with one more comment that forefathers made, because his followers are listening as well. And this is a good debate. He said the Berlin Conference is an example of how Europeans think at a higher level. My friend, I have to disagree. Conspiracy, criminal conspiracy, is not the mark of higher level thinking. All they did was gather around the table to say how we're going to carve up this continent. Thieves gather together and decide how we're going to share the loot. Is that higher level thinking? No, it is not. It was simply cooperation in a criminal endeavor. Now, I hope you consider this to be higher level thinking, which is the conference that Fatherland is organizing, as I said at the beginning, in November of this year, knowing this to be the 140th anniversary of that criminal conspiracy by which they carved us up, to gather our peoples together, not just Nigerians, but from other parts of Africa, where we will study, discuss, and consider what their deliberations over the 4 months period that they sat in Berlin. And they shaved our heads while we were sleeping, in a manner of speaking, with a view to undoing the damage that they've done. Now, I hope you applaud that as higher level thinking.
For them, it favored them. Look at what it did to us because of it. They conquered us for it. Yeah, we should be thinking like that.
I said criminals. If you want to consider higher level thinking, if a group of criminals get together and say, how should we rob that bank? That's not higher level thinking.
All right. Thank you, forefathers. Let's go to Jide. Jide, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, forefathers, for giving me the opportunity. Good to see everyone. Hello, panelists, those that are making comments, and our special guest, Dele Ogun. I've been following you for a very long time. I'm a strong supporter of you, and thank you so much for educating us once again today. I have some comments that I need to make, and I want to hear your reaction. It's a kind of a slight disagreement on some of your analysis, particularly geopolitical analysis, and you were talking about the USAID, right? You emphasized on and even encouraged the abolition of the USAID by the current far-right white nationalist Republican government under Donald Trump. And you actually said it was of goodwill, that it was actually great that it was abolished because it was part of the liberal agenda of the Democrats to actually enforce American dominance. However, what we have is that currently the USAID is abolished not because they want to make America great again, to make America as a country a great country, like to invest in the American people, to make America a great country in context. That's not the reason. The reason why USAID is abolished is for three major reasons. The two are political. The third is for imperial, is to change the strategy of imperial ambition. So the first one, Why is USAID abolished? If you look at the chain of events that happened for the past 10 years, I'll say 5 years, before Donald Trump came into power, we've seen a seismic shift, and I think you will agree with that, in the geopolitical arena, where USAID and other non-governmental organizations have been trying to cause regime change operations in so many parts of the world. And it's no longer as effective as it used to be. Examples of such countries are Georgia, Iran. We even had cases in Venezuela recently, in Bolivia. Those, even Elon Musk even was advocating for a regime change operation in Bolivia. So these organizations, they are, would I say, becoming redundant? That's the first reason. The second reason is political. You see, a lot of these NGOs, they are connected to a lot of mainstream media, like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and Donald Trump, as an individual, as a politician, as a astute politician, is aware of how a lot of this mainstream media are using a lot of these NGOs to propagate liberal narratives, liberal analysis, and they are also making narratives that would destroy his political ambitions. And scrapping those NGOs would benefit him in that regard. The third reason is geopolitical. And what am I emphasizing on geopolitical? Now they have to change the strategy because America as a country, which is a global empire, its empire is now declining. A lot of people are now aware of some of the geopolitical gimmicks by the US. So now they're not changing their strategy, and they're now coming wholesome and changing their strategy and causing more effective regime change operations in such a way that it will now be more successful and effective. So I think those are the three major reasons. Having said those reasons, my question now comes. Here is my question. So my question now is, don't you think it's now going to be much easier to fight the imperial? Because like we both agree, and I agree significantly what you said earlier, that Nigeria is a colonial construct. Nigeria is a product of Western imperialism. The reason why Nigeria is the way it is and so many African countries is due to the imperial domination of the Western world. So now, don't you think that now that there's a change in strategy and the Republicans are coming in full force, like this is what we want to do, when they're not hiding it anymore, don't you think now it is now much easier to fight the oppressors? Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Jide, for those comments and the question. Now, as I say, first, I hear what you say about their motives for getting rid of USAID. You say it's becoming redundant, and NGOs using mainstream media, and Trump wants to neutralize that. I forget the third explanation that you gave, but what I say is this. I said at the beginning, don't focus on the messenger, either the individual or the political party or the ideology that is coming from. From our perspective, we only focus on what is coming out, the message, the learning, the insights. He can have whatever agenda he wants, whatever motive he wants, as far as his own personal career is concerned, as far as his agenda for America is concerned. All we are interested in is what is he exposing? And what he has exposed is part of the reason why I have always said the problem is not our people. The problem is the structure as constructed by those who built Nigeria and who know how they are influencing events on the ground in a way that we cannot see. I mean, the highlight of what they exposed, what Trump has exposed on the USAID actually funding the BBC. Can you imagine that? BBC. Why? Because they know the BBC has wider reach than any American mainstream media platform. It's the legacy of an empire. So it was in their interest to be the second largest funder of the BBC after the Foreign Office. So you see, the Foreign Office